So let's go ahead and go over a couple of things. So I don't think we have any first grade today. No. Okay, well, we'll do it in person. First grade, let's go read books of the Bible this week. So we have Ezekiel. Thank you, Faith. Ezekiel. Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah. Again, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah. Good. Those are your books of the Bible this week. So make sure to continue to practice and study. Okay. Second grade, let's go over your memory scripture for this week. Wait, hold on.
James 1:22.
I just said wait.
You gotta wait.
Yeah, I thought I said that. I thought it was. Okay, so let's go ahead and go over your memory scripture. James 1:22. But be doers of the word and not hearers only. Good. Yeah. So James 1:22. But be doers of the word and not only hearers, deceiving yourselves. Good job. So that's your memory scripture for the week. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and get into our lesson. So yesterday's lesson, we continued talking about Jacob. You remember that was the big incident that happened in the family where Jacob stole the blessing. He tricked his father, lied to his father, and was given the blessing. Isaac gave it away thinking he was giving it to Esau, who he wasn't supposed to be giving it to. But anyway, he gave it to Jacob instead. And when Esau found out, Esau was upset about it. And Esau wanted to harm Jacob. So Rebecca, his mother, came up with a plan. And she says, okay, we need to send you away because I'm scared if you stay here, your brother is going to kill you. So I'm going to tell your father to send you away back to my brother's house where you'll be safe. And I'll just tell your father that you want a wife, that you're looking for a wife. And so that's what she told Isaac. And so Isaac agreed, and they sent Jacob away. So Jacob, all alone as a young man, had to leave his home and go to a place he had never been before. He had to leave, where he grew up, where he was his whole life. And this is all because of everything that happened. So I told you during this time, he probably had a lot of time to think about some of the things that he did. He probably, was able to say, man, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have lied to my father. I shouldn't have tricked my father. I'm sure he really thought about all the things that he did wrong. But that's not a bad thing. Sometimes we have to, evaluate ourselves. But the Lord is still good even in that, because that same night he stopped in Bethel, which means house of God. And he went to sleep, and God had given him a dream. If you remember, there was a ladder in his dream that reached from heaven to earth. And he saw the angels going up and down the ladder. And then the Lord spoke to Jacob at this time. And so Jacob had never heard the voice of God for himself until this moment. And God spoke to him and said, Jacob, I am the God of your father, your grandfather Abraham, and your father Isaac. And the Lord told him that he would bless him, that he would protect him, he would keep him safe, and that eventually the Lord would bring him back to the promised land because it would be his. The land belonged to Jacob. And Jacob knew this. But, like I said, because of the things he did, he was going to have to wait and go through some things before he could get it. But the Lord gave him a promise that eventually he would get the land. And so Jacob was grateful to hear God. He was happy about that. So Jacob, as soon as he woke up the next morning, he dedicated that place where he slept, the rocks and everything. He poured oil on it and dedicated it to the Lord. And, he's like, God was in this place. And so when he woke up, he still felt the presence of God. So he was like, maybe it was a dream. Maybe it wasn't a dream, because it felt like it was real, very real. Okay, so let's go ahead and start our lesson today, because remember, he's going to his mom's brother's house. His uncle Laban is his name. That's where he's going. Okay, so Jacob leaves Bethel, and now he's going to finish his journey, and he arrives in Haran, which is the city where his mom was from, Rebecca. That's where she was from, and that's where he arrives, right? And so now he has to try to find his uncle Laban, his family, because there's other people that live there, of course, but now he has to find his uncle Laban. and to see where he is so that he could, have a place to stay. And so whenever he whenever he was in the city, in the field outside of the city, he saw a well there, right? And there were 3 flocks of sheep near it. The shepherds were waiting for their sheep to be watered. That's what they were waiting for. So Jacob stepped up to the shepherds and said, and asked, "My brothers, where do you come from?" And they said, "We are from Haran." And so Jacob says, "Well, do you know a man named Laban? He is my uncle, and I am looking for him. He's the son of Nahor." And they said, "We sure do." And they said, "Well, look, here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep right now." And so here came a woman named Rachel. She was a shepherdess, meaning a woman shepherd. She took care of the sheep. That's what a shepherdess is. And so when Jacob goes to the well, he asks someone, and at that same time when he's asking, Rachel's walking up at the same time. She's a beautiful woman. So when Jacob saw her, he was like, wow, I'm going to be able to find my uncle Laban. Okay, so he talked to her. He explained to her why he was there, who he was. And so Rachel was excited. And so she's like, okay, well, I'll bring you back to my father's house. Her father was Laban. Okay, she said, that's Jacob's uncle. She said, I'll bring you back to to my father's house, right? Because she was happy to find, someone in the family. Okay, so as soon as Laban heard that Jacob had arrived, he rushed out to meet him and give him a big welcome. So they were so excited that Jacob was there because Rebecca is his sister, and so this is his sister's son. So he's excited to see his nephew, pretty much, right? And so Rachel and her older sister Leah, that was Laban's daughters, they were excited as well. So everyone's welcoming Jacob, and I'm sure it feels good for Jacob because he was all alone. He left his home where his mom, his dad, his brother were. He was all alone, but now he has family now. He has someone that's with him now. So I'm sure for him, he's happy about that. Okay, so he was happy to meet them. So after Jacob stayed with Laban for a little while, he would kind of help out around with the animals and stuff like that with Laban. And so Jacob asked Laban, Laban asked Jacob, he says, just because we're related doesn't mean you can work for free, because Jacob was doing all that work for Laban and he was doing it for free. He wasn't even getting paid. Now, does anybody think about, do you think you should work and not get paid? No, absolutely not, right? If you do some work, you want to get paid, right? So Laban's like, Jacob, I'm going to pay you. He said, you're working for me. I don't want you to work for me and you get nothing. You get no money, none of that. But Jacob, during the time that he had been there, the little while that he'd been there, and from the moment he saw her, he really loved Rachel. And he was like, you know what? I really want to marry Rachel. That's who I really want to be with. He says, so listen, Uncle Laban, you don't have to pay me any money, no money at all. He says, what I would like you to do is let me work for you for 7 years and let me marry Rachel, please. So he didn't want to get paid. He said, all I want to do is marry Rachel. He says, I work for you 7 years. After the 7 years is up, let me marry your daughter, Rachel. So he was willing to work for free all this time. All he wanted to do was marry Rachel. So he must have really loved Rachel, right? So to say he didn't want no money just to marry her. That's very interesting. Okay. So that's what he decides to do, though. He decided that he would work the 7 years, then marry Rachel. And Laban was like, cool. And I'm sure Laban agreed because he didn't have to pay Jacob, right? So he's really like, oh yeah, we can do that. I'll let you work 7 years, Jacob. You go ahead and work hard for me. Do all the work. I don't have to pay you. And after the 7 years, I'll let you marry my daughter, Rachel. And so Jacob's excited. He will finally have a wife. So Jacob works those 7 years for Laban, working hard, helping out with the animals, doing whatever Laban needed. Jacob worked hard. So the 7 years are complete. And now it's time for Jacob to marry Rachel. Could you imagine how excited he is at this point, right? Because the 7 years are done. And now he gets to marry the woman that he loves, the woman that he wanted to marry. So they get the wedding ready. They prepare for the wedding. Everything is, together. The wedding day arrives. Jacob's like, yes, I'm gonna have a wife. And so the women, they would when they would get married, they would have on a veil which covered like their face. And now the veils were like usually like very thick. So yeah, she had a veil, and so he's excited, and the wedding is over, everything is done, everybody's excited. They're like, yay, Jacob, he's married. Jacob's like, yes, I finally get to marry Rachel. But whenever Jacob lifted the veil after the wedding was over, it was not Rachel. It was a totally different person. Guess who it was?
Rachel's sister.
Her sister Leah. So Jacob got tricked into marrying someone else. He didn't marry the woman he really wanted to marry. He ended up marrying her sister, her older sister, because Leah was older than Rachel. And so Jacob's sitting there like, what? I did not want to marry Leah. He's like, Laban, why would you trick me like that? Why would you do that to me? That's not what our agreement was. Our agreement was that I would work for 7 years and then I would marry Rachel, but instead you gave me Leah. He's like, I don't love Leah. I don't want to marry Leah. That wasn't what we agreed on. And it's nothing was wrong with Leah. It's just that's not the woman that he wanted to marry. And so Laban's like, yeah, I know, Jacob, but I can't marry the younger sister before I marry the older sister. So I figured I'm gonna just go ahead and let you marry Leah first because she's the big sister. She needed to be married first. I can't marry Rachel before I marry Leah, so I just decided to go ahead and just let you marry Leah. So Jacob was upset because he was tricked. But if you remember, didn't Jacob do the same thing? Yes, Jacob did the same thing. This is called reaping what you sow. So he tricked his father, he tricked his brother, all of that, and now he's getting tricked. So yes, everything that you do to people, everything, the bad and the good that you do to people will always come back to you. That's why it's important you be careful how you treat people and what you do to people, because it may not come back the next day, the next week, the next year, but it eventually will come back. And when it happens, all the bad that you've done to people, it'll come back and you'll be like, that's because I did that to such and such. So that's why we be good to people. We are good we treat them kindly. We're gentle with people. We love people and we respect people, especially when the opportunity comes for us to do it. Even if people are bad to us, we still have to be good to them because that's what God requires us to do. Because when you make the choice to say, I'm going to be bad to them, I'm going to push them down, I'm going to say a mean thing to them, I'm going to, hit them or whatever, that'll come back to you. God will see that. And he will say, well, it's going to happen to you in another way. And we can't get mad when it happens to us because we did it to someone. So Jacob had already did that to his father and his brother. So he had no right to be upset about it. Not just that, but now he's seeing what it feels like to be tricked. And he doesn't like the feeling to be tricked, right? To be lied to. But that's exactly how I'm sure everybody else felt. His brother Esau felt whenever Jacob did it to him. So Jacob is just getting back what he did to others. So Jacob's upset and he's like, I didn't want to marry Leah. That's not who I wanted to marry. And so Laban's like, well, listen, Jacob, I could let you marry Rachel, the one you really want to marry, but you have to work for me another 7 years. So he already worked 7 years to marry Rachel, who he did marry. And now Laban's like, I'll let you marry her this time, but now you have to work for me 7 more years. So that would be 14 years he would be working for Laban for free. Because remember, the agreement was that he was working to marry the women. And so Jacob is like, what should I do? Should I just stay married to Leah and just let it be what it is? Or should I marry Rachel too and work another 7 years? Guess what he decides to do? Work another 7 years. So he must have really loved Rachel, right? For him to work that long for her. Yeah. So he decides that he was going to work another 7 years for Rachel. And so he does marry Rachel, but now he has to work for Laban for another 7 years. That's why I told you yesterday, I said whenever his mom sent him away, she didn't think Jacob would be gone that long because she sent him away so easily. not knowing, they thought Esau would have let it go, maybe a couple of days, couple of months, couple of weeks, but instead, we're about to see Jacob there for 14 years, and it's actually longer than 14 years that he stayed gone away. He actually didn't even get to see his mom again because she died before he would have go back to the promised land. So Jacob is now working for Laban for this 14 years. But he has the woman that he wanted to marry and her sister. So he's married to both of them. Now, that's not something that you're supposed to do, have more than one, spouse, but he did. He was married to both women. Yes, he was married to both sisters. And actually, that wasn't the only wives he had, but we'll talk about that tomorrow because he's actually going to get 2 more. Yeah, there's a lot of wives. So Jacob, he marries both women, and he decides, he's like, I love Rachel, and so I'm gonna do it. So he's gonna work the extra 7 years for Laban. So during this time, whenever they were married, Jacob did not love Leah. He didn't, right? He did not love Leah because, and that's really the truth. That's not who he wanted to marry. And so he really loved Rachel. But Leah would have a lot of children. So during this time, Leah had a lot of children, and Rachel didn't have any children. And so Rachel, what she did is she asked Jacob to marry one of her servants so that they could have children. Kind of like how Sarah did with Hagar. Yep. So she did the same thing. So Jacob married one of her servants to have children. And then whenever Leah found out that Rachel did that, she told Jacob to marry her servant to have children with her servant. Yes. So now he has 4 wives and a bunch of children. Finally, Rachel does have children. Finally, she has 2 sons. She has Joseph and Benjamin. That was her 2 sons that she had, that her and Jacob have together. So Leah had all the rest of them. I'm sorry, she had some of them, then the 2 servants had some of them, and we'll talk about who all of them are when we get to Joseph next week. We'll talk about all the sons of Jacob. So it was 12 sons total he had. 12 sons, yeah. They had a lot of children, but he had 4 wives, y'all, so you expect that. So Jacob, during the 7 years extra that he's working, they have a bunch of children during this time. And Rachel, she had the 2 sons, Benjamin and Joseph. That's the 2 sons because there's something special about them, but we'll get into that next week. So after Jacob, had his children, not only did his family start to grow, but Jacob also started to grow in blessings. He started to have a bunch of animals. He had a part of the land. He was blessed as well. And so after some time of being there and becoming more blessed and having more children, Jacob was like, I think I'm ready to go back home. He's like, Laban, I've done my years of work for you. I'm married. I have my children. We have our own thing. He says, I think it's time I leave to go back to my hometown because I really didn't want to come here this long. But me and you made an agreement. And so I followed through with my agreement. Now that I'm done working for you, Laban, I am ready to go back home. But Laban was like, no, Jacob, please don't leave. He's like, I need you to stay here, please. I want you to be here. He says, look, since you've been with me, Jacob, I've been blessed. Because remember, who carries the blessing right now? Jacob, right? Remember, Abraham gave it to Isaac and Isaac gave it to Jacob. So Jacob is carrying the blessing from God right now. And so he's extremely blessed. So that means everybody who's around Jacob is blessed as well, which means Laban was just as blessed because he was with Jacob. And Laban knew that. And so that's why Laban's like, no, Jacob, stay. Since you came live with me these last 14 years, I've been extremely blessed and I don't want to lose that. Laban's like, Jacob, just stay a little longer. Just stay a few more years. Don't take my daughters away from me. If they leave and my grandchildren, he's like, no, just go ahead and stay a little bit. And so Jacob says, okay. He says, well, listen, Laban, I'll stay, but let's have an agreement. What I want you to do is give me half of your animals, okay? He says, give me a part of it, your sheep, your goats, your cattle, all of that. Give me some of it, and I'll stay with you longer. And so Laban's like, okay, I'll go ahead and give you some of my animals, and you can stay here a little longer, okay? And so Jacob had those things, but it's like his animals started to have more babies. So like he was getting blessed. Even from the little bit that Laban gave him, it like multiplied. You know what I'm saying? He had like more. So it's like Jacob is just extremely blessed and he knows that. So we see the blessing that God gave him. Now the spiritual side of it is coming and we see the physical side, but he still doesn't have the land yet, right? Because he's living with Laban. The land is still, not his. But we see Jacob's wealth increasing. He's getting more and more blessed. That's why Laban says stay, because Laban knew that. He's like, I've been blessed because of you, Jacob. So come on and stay here. And so then problems started though. Laban started to see how blessed Jacob was. And Laban was like, I'm jealous because now you have more stuff than me, Jacob. Now you're more blessed than me. And so then he started to say, Jacob, I'm going to pay you less. I'm going to pay you less. Like he kept changing his wages. It was just a mess. And so Jacob is like, I don't like this tricking. I don't like all of this. And Jacob's like, it's time for me to go. It's time. He stayed an extra few years and it got bad. And so Jacob was like, I think it's time for me to leave. And so this time, though, the Lord spoke to Jacob and said, it's time to return. So now Jacob did not have a choice, right? Because God told him, it's time for you to go back to your land. It's time for you to go and possess the land. And so he told his wives, Rachel and Leah, and he said, we're going to go back to the land. And Rachel and Leah said, okay, we'll go with you. And so they replied, we are ready to go with you. We believe that God is with you. So Laban had left home one day and Jacob decided he would sneak away. He's like, all right, we're going to sneak out because he knew Laban wouldn't want him to leave because he didn't want to let him leave the first time. So Jacob's like, okay, we're going to sneak away and go. And Laban, well, he's going. So Laban had left home one day and him and all his stuff, all his family, his wives, his children, they packed up everything and they started to travel to go. So when Laban returns home, he realizes, wait, Jacob left and he didn't even say anything. So Laban says, I'm going to go find him and I'm bringing him back. So Laban starts to go to get Jacob, to bring Jacob back. But the Lord speaks to Laban and tells Laban, do not. He says, do not bring Jacob back. The Lord commanded Jacob to leave. And so Laban better listen to the Lord, right? And do what the Lord says. So whenever Laban catches up with Jacob, he sees Jacob and he listens to God. He says, I'll let you go. He's like, but you didn't have to sneak away like that. But Jacob's like, but I knew if I would have told you I wanted to leave, you would have told me not to leave. So that's why I did that. But Laban, he understood and he honored and respected God's decision. And so Jacob is now finally leaving Laban's home after 20 years of being there. 20 years he was stuck at Laban's house, right? But at 14 was his choice, though. He chose to work those 14 years, right? The rest was because Laban made him stay. And so now God was telling Jacob to go back home, and now it was time for Jacob to leave. So him and his family are now making their way back to the promised land. But there's one thing that's staying on Jacob's mind. Remember, he left originally because who was he running from? Laban. The first one, he left the promised land. He was running from Esau, his brother. So now it's been 20 years, yes, a long time. Some people stay mad that long though. Some people hold a grudge for a long time like that. So Jacob's like, I'm happy and I'm excited, Lord, to be going back home, but I don't know how Esau feels. It's been 20 years, yes, I haven't seen him, but is he still mad? Is he okay with me? I don't know. And so Jacob's kind of concerned because he's like, I don't know how Esau's going to receive me. Last time I saw Esau, he wanted to kill me. So he's like, I don't know. Should I stay or should I go? He's like, oh, Lord. So that's what we'll talk about tomorrow. What'll happen when Jacob goes back and when he does see his brother Esau, because they will meet each other and we'll see if Esau forgave him or if Esau's still mad. Okay?
Right. I remember.
Good. Okay. So how was that? That's our Bible lesson today on Jacob meeting his match and he finally being able to experience what it feels like to be tricked. Okay? All right, so how is that? Everybody's screen is muted. I can't hear.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
All right, guys. So good. So that's our Bible lesson on